G'day, Michael here, and welcome to the fourth part of this game environment tutorial series. In the previous part, we looked at how to create stylized textures for our meshes. This part will be a shorter tutorial to create a set of seamless tiling textures for Unity's terrain. It will be similar to the second part, except in this case we don't need to bake a high poly mesh onto the plane. So this is what we ended up with in the previous part. I'm just going to hide everything in their collections. And I'm going to go through creating a tiling canvas. So Shift A and add a mesh plane. Zoom in a bit. I'm just going to hit RX90 to rotate it by 90 degrees. It needs a new material assigned, so go to the material properties and click new. Let's just call this one tiling material. And we're going to duplicate this plane 8 times, so Shift D, press Z and move it up 2 units, Shift D, X2, Shift D, Z, -2, Shift D, Z, -2. And we're just going to create this 3x3 tiling canvas. Now we just need to select all 9 planes and do a File, Export, FBX. We want to click on Selected Objects, and we'll just call this one Tiling Plane, and then Export. Now we just need to jump across into Substance Painter, and click on File, New. The resolution will set to 2K, normal map format OpenGL, because we're exporting to Unity. And then for the file, I'll click on Select and choose the tiling plane, and then OK. So with this tiling plane, if we draw on one of the faces, it will repeat across all of the others. So we can see how a tiling texture will look spread across a larger area. I'm going to come across to the layers and click on the rubbish bin to delete it and add in a group. This group I'm going to call Sand1, and I'm going to add in a fill layer that I'm going to call base color. I'm going to enable the roughness and give the roughness about a 0.7. And for the base color, we're going to choose a sort of sandy yellow color. I'm going to add a new fill layer above this one, and we'll call it color variation. We're going to give it a slightly darker color. And we're also going to turn on height and give it a value of 0.35. We'll also add a roughness value of 0.5. I'm going to add a black mask. And then add an effect. I'm going to choose Add Fill. And I'm going to go Add Filter as well. For the fill effect, I'm going to select the grayscale button, and I'm going to search for creased, and then add this creased procedural effect. This is going to give a bit of like a sand dune sort of look to it. Again, going for a stylized aesthetic. We're going to set the scale to 2, and the disorder to 0.1, and the warp intensity to 0.08. And then on the filter, I'm going to add a filter effect called Blur Slope. It's going to create a bit more of a painterly style. I'm going to increase the intensity to 0.2, and then add one more fill layer, which I'm going to call Roughness. It's just going to have a roughness value, and we'll set that to 0.35. So this should make it look a fair bit more shiny. You can press Shift right click to rotate the sun in Substance. I'm going to right click and add a black mask. Add in a fill effect. And we're going to choose Grunge Map 004. This sort of spotty effect. Let's increase the tiling to 2, and the contrast will go to 0.5. And it's a little bit strong, so let's decrease the opacity to about 30%. So very quickly we have made this tiling texture which we can apply to the terrain. But if we're just using the one texture, it is going to get very repetitive, so let's make a couple more that we can use to blend throughout the terrain. We can simply use the same group we just created to develop a few more variations for the terrain. So I'm just going to duplicate sand 1. We'll just hide the original and we'll call the next one sand 2. I'm actually going to leave the colors for both of the layers, but I'm going to go to the color variation and I'm going to change the height down to 0.1, and we're going to reduce the opacity of the color to about 35. But we are going to change the settings on the mask, so the blur slope, we're going to set this to about 0.6. And for the fill, instead of the creased, we're going to search for a grunge map. We're going to grunge map 005. And again, that's going to create this sort of stylized wavy sand look. If we want, we could decrease the tiling on one of the axes, so let's just untick the padlock. And we'll set the tiling on the U to 0.5. And we might also increase the contrast a bit as well. Let's also change the grunge on the roughness, so instead of grunge 004, let's change this to 002. And that's just going to change the shiny bits of the texture. Let's make another one, so again we'll duplicate sand 1, bring it to the top, and just hide sand 2 and enable sand 1. And we'll call this 3. Let's open it up and select the color variation. We'll change the base color here to a slightly lighter color, and the height will reduce to 0.1 again. Let's select the mask and the fill effect, and we'll change it from creased, and we'll do a search for grunge rock. And we'll choose the grunge rock procedural. We'll jump to the blur slope and change this to 0.5 to smooth it out a little bit, and that can be our third texture. For our final texture, let's duplicate sand 3, and we'll call this new one rock. So much more rocky texture for this one. So if we want to use this one for cliff faces instead of just the ground, let's open up the group. We'll select the base color and change the color to a darker brown. And for the color variation, we also want a bit of a darker color. For the fill effect on the color variation mask, we'll select the grunge rock. And instead, we're going to search for grunge concrete dusty. And we'll choose that one. And we'll actually get rid of the roughness, so we'll just delete that layer. And that is going to be our rock terrain texture. So we have our 4 textures, which we're going to use for our Unity terrain, but we do need to export it in a particular way for Unity. So go to the File and Export Textures. And we're going to go to the Output Templates, and we're going to create a new template. Click on the plus button. And that'll create a new preset down here. If we double click, we can call this one Unity Terrain. And we want to add an RGB plus A. This one we're going to call $texture set. This will append the name of the texture set at the start of the texture. Then we'll do an underscore diffuse. So that is our color. And then underscore smooth. And the Unity terrain uses the alpha value of the color texture as the smooth or inverse roughness value. Now we're going to click on RGB and call this one $texture set underscore normal. So this will be for our normal map. And now we need to connect the inputs up. So we want to drag and drop the base color from the input to the RGB of our diffuse texture, and we'll choose RGB channels. For the alpha slot, we're going to drag and drop the glossiness value, and we're going to choose gray channel. And then we're going to drag the normal OpenGL into the RGB slot of our normal texture and go RGB channels. And that is our template set up for our Unity terrain texture export specifically. So now we can export our textures, go to the settings, choose a location to save your textures. So now we need to change our template. So we'll go to our output template and choose our Unity terrain. And it's only going to export that diffuse smooth map and the normal map. And then we'll click on export. When you want to export the next texture, just close this one, hide the rock and unhide the sand, do a file, export textures. Now it is going to override the previous material that you exported because it will have the same name, so make sure you go into your folder, change the name to rock or rock texture, rock terrain, and then do the next export. Hide it, unhide sand 2, make sure to change the name in the folder, file, export textures, and repeat that. So we should now have 4 sets of exported textures for the Unity terrain. That means all of the modeling and texturing is now done. We have all the assets we need to start populating our game environment. The next part of the series will see us using the Unity terrain engine to sculpt a large environment and paint on the tiling textures we just made. As part of this process, we'll start to place the 3D assets around the scene, such as the bridges and arches. If you would like access to the completed files or the tutorial notes, you can check that out on the Patreon. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode.